something happened. That much is clear. It happened in a way that left a mark. Not a small mark, not the kind that fades in a week and becomes a story told with slight irony at dinner. The kind that changes how you move through certain rooms, certain conversations, certain kinds of trust. What was done to you was real. The weight of it was real, and the person responsible, who knows or should have known, has never looked you in the eye and said, "I was wrong. What I did was wrong. I caused you harm and I am sorry." They have not said it, and at some point, recently, or months ago, or years ago, you understood they were not going to, and yet some part of you is still oriented toward it. Still at the dock, watching the horizon, waiting for a ship that left by another route long ago. You go about your days, you function, you have built a life that works in most of its dimensions. But underneath the working life there is this, the unresolved thing, the case that was never properly closed, the hearing that was never held, and the one witness who could confirm what you already know, the only person whose acknowledgement would carry the full specific weight of actually having been there, has declined to appear. You know the way it feels when something reminds you. A name mentioned casually in a conversation you were not even paying full attention to. A street, a song, a small thing that carries their signature in a way you cannot fully explain to anyone who wasn't there, and in the moment of that reminder, something tightens in the chest. Not as dramatically as it once did, perhaps, but still there, still capable of doing something to the quality of the next several minutes. Something in you goes briefly back to that place, and you find yourself again rehearsing the conversation, the one where they finally understand, the one where they say the specific words, not a general apology, but the specific one, the one that names what actually happened. That would give you what the years of waiting have been organized around obtaining. You have had this conversation 100 times in your mind. In some versions they are contrite, in others they argue, and you are finally able to say the thing that was taken from you the first time clearly, with no one interrupting. In some versions you are calm and precise. In others you speak with the full voice of someone who was silenced and is no longer willing to be. And regardless of how the imagined conversation unfolds, the result is the same. It ends with acknowledgement, with some confirmation that what you experienced was real, that what was done was wrong, that you were not invisible in that harm. And then the imagined conversation ends. The actual situation has not changed, and you are still holding the thing, still waiting, still waiting, still waiting. Most people arriving at this place will eventually do one of two things. They will decide to let go, or perform the decision to let go, while still carrying the case internally, still measuring the other person against the verdict, still organizing part of their interior life around the unanswered grievance. Or they will hold it explicitly, purposefully as a matter of principle, because releasing it without acknowledgement feels like allowing the injustice to stand, like saying, "This happened and it didn't matter." Both positions carry real dignity. Both positions also carry real cost. And neither one is the only available path. Your suffering is not false. Some wounds are real. What was done to you was real. And the desire for acknowledgement, for another person to see and confirm what you experienced, to make the harm legible to someone other than your separatists. Weakness. It is one of the most profoundly human things there is. You did not fail by wanting it. You did not fail by waiting for a long time. But the apology you have been waiting for was never going to make you whole. It would have helped, genuinely, and you were right to want it. But the healing you have been delaying until it arrived was never actually contingent on their willingness to offer it. The waiting was not the price of your recovery. It became the obstacle. The waiting is not passive. That is the first thing to understand clearly. It feels passive. You are simply oriented towards something that has not arrived, holding a position, staying with the record. But the waiting is doing something to you, in you, every day that it continues. The waiting keeps you in the presence of the wrong. Not physically, you may not have spoken to this person in years, but internally the wrong remains current, ongoing in the sense that your attention continues to circle it. You carry it into rooms they are not in. You rehearse the confrontation in situations where it will never happen. You measure new encounters, new trust, new connection, new moments that resemble what was broken, against the template set by the one who did not acknowledge you. And in all of these ways, the person who caused the harm continues to occupy a position at the center of your interior life, not because they belong there, but because the unresolved case keeps drawing your attention back. Think of standing at a harbor, watching the horizon for a ship that left by another route. You were supposed to meet there. Something was supposed to be exchanged. An acknowledgement, a reckoning, a moment that would balance what was previously imbalanced. And the ship did not come, not by accident, not by delay, but by a choice made elsewhere without consulting you. And you are still at the harbor. Your grievance with the ship is entirely real. Your right to expect its arrival was real, but the ship is not on this horizon. It is not coming to this harbor. And every hour you spend watching for it is an hour spent at the harbor rather than wherever your actual destination is. This was not weakness, it was intelligence under pressure. When something is genuinely unresolved, when a case remains open, when justice has not been served, staying oriented toward its resolution is entirely reasonable. The holding is a form of integrity. It says, "What was done was real, and I will not pretend otherwise by moving on as though it's what." There is real moral weight in that decision, but there is a difference between honoring the truth of what happened and organizing your ongoing life around waiting for a resolution that only the other person can provide. There is a difference between maintaining clarity about the wrong and remaining indefinitely in the psychological position of the person wronged, which requires the wrong to be continuously present in order to remain accurate. There is a difference between keeping your own clear record and keeping a case open that cannot be tried because the other party has chosen not to appear. The wrongdoer moved on. This is the difficult fact, not because they were right to, perhaps they were not, but as a simple, observable fact, they are living a life that does not center this event, and you are living a life that does. The asymmetry of that, the fact that you are spending real energy on something they are not, is one of the quiet costs of the waiting that is rarely named directly, because to name it feels somehow like conceding something. You may not be responsible for what was done to you, but you are responsible for what you continue to practice inside yourself. These are not the same burden. One was placed on you. The other is something only you can now examine and, if you choose, change. Begin quietly. Notice honestly how often the unresolved thing visits in a single day. Not to judge the frequency, only to see it clearly. Each time the thought arrives, name it simply, without self-criticism. I am at the harbor again. You do not have to stop going there today. Only see that you are going. That seeing is where a different kind of choice becomes possible. And once you see what the waiting is doing, a deeper question becomes unavoidable. What was the apology actually for? Not what it would feel like, not what it would symbolize, but what function it was meant to perform in your interior life. Because the desire for the apology is not simply desire for social tidiness or the relief of a resolved conflict. It is something more fundamental. You wanted them to say, in words they chose, that what happened was real, that you were not imagining the harm, that the account you have been keeping, quietly, privately, without witness, is accurate. You wanted the acknowledgement to confirm your reality, to make the harm legible to someone other than yourself, to give the wound a name that someone besides you has signed. This is profoundly human. The need for another person to see and confirm what you experienced is not excessive. It is how human beings have always organized their sense of what is real and shared, rather than only internal. And when the person who caused the harm is also the person whose acknowledgement would carry the most weight, because they were there, because they know what they did, because their confirmation is the most specific available, the desire for that confirmation is especially powerful and especially reasonable. But here is what the years of waiting have revealed. If you are willing to look at them honestly, the apology, if it came, would confirm what you already know. It would say in their words what you have been saying in yours all along. And then the day would continue. The harm would remain in the past, where it has always been, and you would still be the one who had to build a life in its aftermath. Their words would not undo what was done. They would not reach backward into the past and restructure the event. They would add to the harm that occurred a verbal acknowledgement from the person who caused it. That is not nothing. It is genuinely something. But it is not the authority over your recovery. It was never what the healing required, even when it felt like the only thing that could begin it. Can you acknowledge what happened without requiring them to acknowledge it? Can you hold the truth of the harm without requiring their confirmation to make the truth real? Can you be certain of the wrong without needing their confession to make your certainty valid? These questions have answers. And the answers are yes, which means their participation in your recovery was never the condition it was made to feel like. Think of a fire started by someone else, real fire started by a real action causing real damage. You did not deserve to be standing in its heat, and you were right to say so. But the fire is burning now, has been burning in its different forms for however long this has continued, and you are the one tending it. Not the person who lit it. They may not even know the fire is still burning. Every time you return to the grievance, rehearse the confrontation, measure your current situation against the injustice of what was not acknowledged, you add fuel, small amounts, entirely understandable fuel. But fuel, the fire was started by them, the tending these years has been yours. Do not hate yourself for this. Hatred is another cage. The tending was a form of witness, or refusal to let the wrong dissolve into the past unexamined, unnamed, uncomforted. That impulse was not wrong. But at some point, the witness became a keeper. The fire stopped serving any purpose other than continuing to burn. And you are now the one deciding, each day, whether to continue adding to it. There is also something else the waiting does, something subtler than the depletion of energy. It keeps the person who robbed you relevant. It keeps them current. It maintains in the center of your interior life a version of them that is permanent and powerful, not the ordinary, limited, probably confused and imperfect person they actually are, but the version large enough to require your ongoing attention. And in that way, the waiting, which began as a form of justice seeking, has become a form of continued relationship. You are still in relationship with them, still oriented toward them, still giving them a kind of significance in your life that they have not earned. Releasing that significance is not the same as saying they were unimportant. They were. What they did was important. Its effects have been real and lasting. But there is a difference between acknowledging the importance of what happened and giving the person who caused it continued residence in the center of your present life. The harm was real and historical. Your present life is not correct. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Releasing the grievance is not excusing the harm. Moving forward is not saying the wrong was acceptable. Stopping the weight is not giving them the victory. And releasing them from their position of centrality in your interior life is not saying they did not matter. These distinctions are the entire distance between healing and the sustained performance of not healing. And the mind that has not made them does always choose to stay, because releasing without those distinctions feels like a betrayal of what was real. Begin quietly Ask yourself honestly, if the apology came tomorrow, the full, genuine, specific acknowledgement you have been waiting for, what would actually change in your life the following week? Not what would feel different temporarily, what would actually be different in the substance of how you live? The honest answers to that question is the beginning of seeing where the actual work lives and where the actual freedom is. And once you see what the apology was for and what it could never do, the chain becomes finally visible. You have been making your own recovery contingent on another person's choice. You have given to the person who caused the harm the authority over when your healing is allowed to begin, and they have not used that authority in your favor. And the years have continued. This was not weakness. Making the wrongdoer responsible for the repair has a certain moral logic. They caused the harm, they should name it. Requiring their acknowledgement before release is a reasonable moral position, but the moral position and the practical position are not the same thing. Morally they owe you, practically they are not paying, and holding the position indefinitely, maintaining the requirement even as the payment does not come, costs you, not them, because you are the one living inside the requirement. You are the one whose daily energy is organized around it. They have moved on. The requirement remains yours to carry. Think of an anchor. It was placed deliberately, for real reasons, in the middle of a storm that required something to hold. It is heavy, genuinely, substantially heavy. But the storm has passed, and the vessel cannot move with the current, cannot reach the harbor it is actually meant for. The anchor is not the other person. They have been gone. The anchor is the claim, real, legitimate, morally accurate, and self-placed. The claim that their acknowledgement is the condition of your release. The claim is true, and the anchor is yours to lift. This is what is most difficult to accept, because if they caused the harm, why should you be the one to do the lifting? That question is fair. The answer is this: because you are the one still here. Because your life continues and the anchor does not care about fairness. It only knows that it is down and the current is moving. Can you release the requirement without releasing the truth of what happened? Can you let go of the waiting without letting go of the clarity that the wrong was real? Can you take back the authority over your own recovery from someone who has shown, through their silence, their absence, the years of not coming, that they will not use it for you? This is not forgiveness as it is commonly understood, the one that requires you to feel warmly toward the person who caused the harm. This is something more specific, the retrieval of your own authority from the place you deposited it when the harm was new. The harm remains. Your right to have wanted acknowledgement remains, but the authority over what happens next returns to you. Begin quietly. Write down in a single sentence what you have been waiting for them to say. The specific words as closely as you can. Read the sentence back to yourself. Now ask, is this true? Is what this sentence says actually true, regardless of whether they would ever speak it? If yes, and almost certainly yes, then what, specifically, remains to be provided that you do not already possess? And once you take back that authority, even partially, even in one quiet interior moment, something becomes available that has not been accessible while you faced the harbor. Not happiness, not sudden relief, something quieter and more structural, direction. The capacity to move towards something that does not require their participation, to invest in what is actually here rather than in the perpetual orientation toward what will not come from that direction. Think of a river that has been blocked. The water does not stop being water. It does not stop moving toward where water always moves. But blocked, it builds pressure behind the obstruction, pressing against what will not yield, and the river does not require the dam to be removed. It shapes a new channel over time, finds the path the terrain actually offers, reaches its destination by a different route than the one it originally intended. This is not giving up. This is the nature of water. It moves through what is actually available, rather than pressing forever against what is closed. The dam is still there. The wrong is still real, but the river has found its way around it. Stopping the weight is opening a new channel, and in doing so you discover that the water, your energy, your attention, the genuine care you have for your own life was always there. It was only blocked. Daily life, in the time after this choice, changes gradually. The name that once landed like a small wound still arrives sometimes, but it is lighter, because the case it carried has become slightly less current. The imagined confrontation it visits, but less compulsively, because you are no longer depending on it to begin your healing. The grief is still real. The grief is allowed to remain real, but it is grief that can move now, rather than grief held fixed by the waiting. And the ordinary day, which once seemed only a backdrop to the unresolved thing, begins to have its own weight again. What you invest in today, what you build, what you tend, what you offer, begins to accumulate meaning that is entirely yours, not a reaction to the harm, not a performance of recovery, an actual life lived from what actually remains. Begin quietly. Choose one thing, just one, that you have been delaying until the apology arrived. Not a large restructuring. One small thing you have kept behind, the precondition. Do that thing today, without fight. Be then faithful as the first private act of building from ground that was always yours. There is something that happens when the waiting stops, gradual, by degree, but real. The energy that was going to the horizon begins to return, not as happiness. There is no promise of happiness here, because the harm was real, and some of what it changed will not be restored, but as something more durable, direction, the capacity to build, something that does not require their acknowledgement to stand. You remove the weight, and the energy spent on it returns, redirected, however slowly, toward what is actually present. You release the requirement that their apology precede your healing, and the healing that was always possible opens in the space where the requirement was. You stop organizing your interior life around an absence, and you discover that the life entirely independent of their acknowledgement has been waiting for you to arrive at it. You stop being the defendant in a case that was never properly tried, and you begin, in ordinary, unglamorous moments, being the person who builds. Not because the wrong was not done, it was. Not because the harm was not real, it was. Not because the harm was not real, it was. Not because justice was served, it was not. But because your life is yours, the daily, ongoing, actual experience of life herewise, and it deserves to be built from what is actually present, by you, without requiring their participation to begin. Think of what the practitioner builds over years of quiet training, not the fortress facing outward. All walls and battlements aimed at the direction of the original harm, every defense organized toward that one specific source, but the ground at the center, the depth that sustains, rather than the perimeter that protects, the inner fortress whose gates can open, whose interior is genuine, whose walls exist not to keep everything out, but to protect what has been carefully, quietly, privately built within, clarity about what happened, honest grief for what was lost, and the capacity earned through the daily practice of not waiting, to move from that clarity without being required, to remain inside it. This is not the forgetting of what was done. This is the choosing of what to build from what remains. The practice of building in the aftermath of an unacknowledged harm is not glamorous. It does not have the energy of the imagined confrontation. It does not produce the catharsis of the apology finally given. It is the slow, private, entirely unwitnessed work of investing in what is actually here rather than what is owed from there. It is the morning in which you make one small choice toward your own life, without calculating whether they would notice or approve. It is the conversation in which you are genuinely present, not performing recovery, not waiting for the right moment to say something true about your experience, but actually here with the person in front of you, in the actual moment. It is the day in which the harbor is not the first thought, and then the week in which it is not the first thought. And then the slow season in which you realize, without announcement, that what you are building is larger than what was taken. Let your life become the evidence, not the declaration that you have forgiven, not the performance of someone who has moved on while secretly still watching the horizon, but the actual daily practice of a person who builds from what is here, who invests in what is present, who moves toward what is ahead, who holds the truth of the past without being required to face only that direction for the rest of the journey. The ship that owes you something is not coming to this harbor. That is not your failure. That is their choice, and your harbor is yours. What you do with it from here belongs entirely to you.